There are three main regions of the United States: the North, the South, and the West. Although technically not a main region, the East is an auxiliary region, which I will explain more later on. Characteristics of states that make up the Greater North consists of: other than siding with the North during the Civil War, northern states belong in the cool continental climate region of the United States that is influenced by the Great Lakes, and is synonymous with being the agricultural and industrial heartland of the United States, as a large percentage of the North consists of farmland, and the North was the first region to become industrialized, as well as being called Yankees and referring to soda as pop, and pronouncing the word car funny.
This is not a cartoon level.
Characteristics of states that make up the Greater South consist of a historic cash crop-based economy and reliance on slave labor, as well as belonging in the humid subtropical region of the United States that is influenced by the Gulf of Mexico, as well as having rednecks, hillbillies, country music, iced tea, southern hospitality, and many other unique characteristics. Characteristics of states that make up the Greater West consist of high plains, badlands, and the Rocky Mountains. The West belongs in the arid temperate climate region of the United States, and is synonymous with cowboys, and the Wild West that are glamorized by Hollywood, as well as mountain biking, ranching, and Western music, which is different from country music. Southern accents and Western accents are very often mistaken for each other, as they both sound very similar. However, modern-day Southern accents are almost identical to Western accents.
General Jackson, do you know what these decorations signify?
I was wondering if someone would tell me.
Maybe he could have done something? I feel like you should take your woman and child and get lost.
As well as country and Western music.
Once I had a girl on Rocky Top, and by the other half cat. Wild and a mean but sweet as soda pop, I still dream about that.
1,000 miles from nowhere. Time don't matter to me, 'cause I'm 1,000 miles from nowhere, and there's no place.
Northern accents are very distinguishable from Southern and Western accents.
You have breakfast yet, Margie?
Oh, yeah. Norm made some eggs.
Yeah?
The North doesn't have its own genre of music like the South and the West do, but if the North did, it would sound like this.
The ship was the pride of the American side, coming back from some mill in Wisconsin. As the big freighters go, it was bigger than most.
Each of the three main regions are made up of an inner sub-region, as well as hybrid sub-regions, which make up the border between the three main regions. Hybrid sub-regions contain states that belong to more than one region. An example of a hybrid sub-region state is Kentucky, that is both northern and southern and thus makes up the border region between the two regions. An inner sub-region contains states that belong to only one of the three main regions. An example of an inner region state is Iowa, that only belongs to the North region, as it is not bordering a state from an inner region of either the South or the West. The East is not a hybrid subregion, as these states do not divide regions, unlike states that border the North and the South and the states that border the West. However, the East makes up the eastern sub-regions of both the North and the South. Some may classify the East as its own region, as it is separated from the rest of the North and the South by the Appalachian Mountains, and were a part of the original 13 colonies. However, it cannot be considered a main region, as the North and South divide first started in the East, which is why it is an auxiliary region. The states of the East consist of New England, New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, which make up the eastern subregion of the North. Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, which make up the eastern subregion of the South, as well as Delaware, Maryland, and West Virginia, which make up the eastern subregion of both the North and the South. States in the northeastern region are just as northern as the states in the inner North. States in the southeastern region are just as southern as states in the inner South. However, states in the northeast do not comprise the inner North, as they are half northern and half eastern. similar to the states that are half northern and half southern, and the states that are half northern and half western. The same applies to the southeastern states as well. Again, this is why the East is constituted as an auxiliary region unlike the hybrid regions, as it does not divide two main regions. It merely exists in the regions of the Greater North and the Greater South. The Inner North is comprised of Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, and Iowa, as well as the Eastern North. These states do not border any states from both the Inner West and the Inner South, including the Eastern South. The Inner South is comprised of Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana, as well as the Eastern South. These states do not border any states from both the Inner West and the Inner North, including the Eastern North. The Inner West is comprised of California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. These states do not border any states from the Inner North or the Inner South. There are three hybrid subregions which consist of the Midlands or the Borderlands, which were slave states that sided with the North during the Civil War, and effectively acted as a buffer zone between the two regions. These states consist of Delaware, Maryland, West Virginia, Kentucky, Missouri, and Kansas. And the central subregions, which are divided into the North Central subregion that divides the North and the West. These states consist of North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas. And the South Central subregion, which divides the South and the West. These states consist of Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. These states separate the North and the South from the West because they are where the damp and humid low plains of the North and the South meet the dry high plains and badlands of the West. The western part of these states are more similar to the western states than they are to the northern and southern states culturally, economically, and geographically, and vice versa, with the eastern part of these states being more similar to the northern and southern states than to the western states. Kansas is the only state that belongs to all three of the three main regions, which is why the state is gray. The historical significance of Kansas, and the reason why it belongs to all three regions, is because of the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, that introduced the idea of popular sovereignty to the Western territories, which would allow them to determine whether or not they would allow slavery. Kansas, being close to both the North and the South, was flooded with abolitionists from the North and slavers from the South, who tried to sway the state to being admitted as either a free state or a slave state. Southerners who moved to Texas realized that the dry high plains of West Texas were more suitable for raising cattle than for growing cash crops like tobacco and cotton, which was the sole reason for the existence of slavery and the main source of industry for the South. Like California in 1850, the Western territories would be admitted as free states as they did not rely on slave labor for their main source of industry like the North. This is what prompted the South to secede from the Union, as they knew westward expansion would ultimately threaten the power the South held, and without at least an equilibrium in Congress, the abolition of slavery would be inevitable. Kansas is the only state that has a northern, southern, and western city all in the same state. Topeka, the state's capital, is located in the northeastern part of the state near Lawrence, which was the abolitionist capital during Bleeding Kansas, and is considered to be a northern city. Wichita is located in the southeastern part of the state and has a southern influence due to its general close proximity to the Ozark Mountains of Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. Dodge City is located in the western high plains of Kansas, and similarly to Deadwood, South Dakota, and Abilene, Texas, is synonymous with cowboys in the Wild West. The reason why it is important to understand the regions of the United States is because many people are ignorant and don't understand the cultural differences and similarities that the states have. Many people assume that only Texas has cowboys, when in reality, not only does Texas also have rednecks from the eastern part of the state, but there are also 16 other states that have the same cowboy culture as Texas. Many people think that Minnesota and Montana are the same just because they both border Canada, when in reality they are completely different from each other, as Minnesota is more culturally similar to Ohio than Montana, and Montana is more culturally similar to New Mexico than Minnesota, but of course you would never know that unless you have read about the two states or actually been there. Foreigners who have never traveled across America typically believe that New York City, Texas, Disneyland, and California are all that America is, and everything else is just a flyover wasteland that is all the same, when in reality this is a great injustice, as the quote-unquote flyover states are the heartland of America, and have distinct geographical and cultural characteristics that are intertwined in American history, as well as define them as being something other than just a so-called flyover state. Anyways, thanks for watching. I am not sure how this video will be received, as I believe I am the only person to publish this particular theory on American regions. This video took me about a week to make, and I would appreciate it if you took 1 second to press the like button, as it would mean a lot.